This is Richard Hayzler, proud principal of Pequannock Valley School, a grade 6 through 8 school in Pompton Plains, New Jersey, as part of the Pequannock Township School District. And welcome to this week's episode of Learning Sparks, where we learn and grow together, talking about instructional strategies that enhance student learning in your classrooms. People often ask me where I get my topics for Learning Sparks each week, and they can come from a variety of places. Very often they come from observations that I have in the classrooms where I see great things happening with my teachers and students. Sometimes they come from conversations that I have with my administrative colleagues or my teaching staff. Sometimes they come from articles or books that I'm currently reading, or an ed camp or a workshop that I've attended. And sometimes they come from Twitter. This past week I was on spring break and I had the opportunity to participate in the Kids Deserve It Twitter chat. If you haven't read the book Kids Deserve It by Adam Welcome and Todd Nesloney, you really should. They were moderating the chat, and it talked about the things in Kids Deserve It that you really enjoy and that have made an impact on you as a teacher or administrator. And when the chat was over, I said to myself, man, I need to reread that book again. So I picked it up and started reading it. And one of the chapters that struck me and said to me, hey, this needs to be this week's topic of Learning Sparks, was chapter 28, For the Love of Reading, because reading matters. We all know the importance of reading and the impact that it has on every student in every content area. You don't go throughout your day very often in any of your content areas without reading something. And it's a skill, quite frankly, that we need to spend more time on and working with our students. Because today, students have so many other things that distract them, whether it's their cell phones, technology, video games, and sometimes reading is the last thing on the list. And so it's important that as teachers and administrators, we instill a love of reading. But how do we do that? And in the book, in chapter 28, they give you some great pointers on how to instill a love of reading in your students. It starts off with something that we do here at PV. Every teacher outside their classroom door has a sign posted that says, "What am I reading?" And the title of the book is there and what the book is about. And sometimes the teachers write what they're learning from their book. And I think it's important to show students that even though teachers have busy schedules, we are readers and we are reading. And sometimes it may be a book that they're reading with their own kids at home, or a book that they're reading for pleasure, or a book that they're reading here at work. I love walking by a classroom and checking it out and seeing what our teachers are reading, because I end up having conversations with them. And sometimes I hear them talking about it with their students in class. One of the things that I'm going to look to do here at PV is have a reading challenge, where we have students reading maybe 20 books between now and the end of the year, or even 5 books because there's only a month left, or 2 books. Having some sort of challenge where the students then get some incentives and they're getting recognized for what they're doing. One of the things that they talk about in this book is that I think they started off in January, and if they read 20 books, they got increments every time they read 5 books. They got to go to the principal's office, the principal would talk to them, they were recognized with a certificate or a prize. Those types of incentives really get to students, and they want to please you, right? And so they're going to work hard in terms of those incentives. Even announcements, where teachers get on the announcements or a student gets on the announcements in the morning and they talk about the book that they're reading or something that they've learned. Get out there and share what you're reading. It could go on a social media post where you're taking pictures of students holding up a book and saying, hey, here's Mr. Hayzler reading The Hardy Boys. I got to walk by, and another tip is have a classroom library. I walked by a teacher's classroom and I couldn't believe it, but they had something that I loved to read as a kid in their classroom library, The Hardy Boys. This is where I fell in love with reading, because my parents modeled it for me. We read for 30 minutes every night, and one of the things that I would read that my dad got me into was The Hardy Boys. He said, this is something that I enjoyed reading as a kid. You may like it, you may not. But he sat down with me and he talked about the book. And the next thing you knew, I was reading all 50 of them. And I know there's more than 50, but I was reading all of them. And now I've done the same thing with my son. And hopefully his passion for reading continues, because it's great when I see him reading these books. So a shout out to Mrs. Sika for having this in her classroom library. You should have a classroom library in every classroom, whether it's an English classroom or a math classroom. I think another aspect of instilling a love of reading is don't have book reports. Okay? There are times for book reports if you're doing it for content, but if you're instilling a love of reading, don't assign a book report. Have students reading in your class every day, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Let them pick something out of your classroom library and read just for fun. Critically important for instilling a love of reading. So have some reading time in your classrooms. It also gives you the opportunity to Skype with authors. This year I got to Skype with Dave Burgess with my entire staff, and we were reading Teach Like a Pirate. What that did was that brought it to life. Dave, in his enthusiastic way, got to talk with us about why he wrote Teach Like a Pirate and how it could affect us in class. I think students don't learn to read and fall in love with reading from a worksheet or a reading passage. They fall in love with reading because they see people doing it and they find things that they're passionate about. So our job as teachers is to instill that love of reading regardless of our content. Get them picking up a book in your classroom and reading. There is nothing more important, because in the end, it's going to help you with your content, and the things that you need to do with your students in your classrooms. So to conclude, I'm going to ask you the 3 questions that Todd and Adam ask in Kids Deserve It. Number 1, do you consider yourself a reader? And how can you be a model for students in terms of reading and instilling a love of reading? Question 2, what are some great things that you've done to instill a love of reading in your students? There are a lot of things in this book and that teachers are doing around the country and around the world. How are you instilling a love of reading? And lastly, what are some of your favorite books to read with your students and on your own? I encourage you to get out there and tweet out your responses to Kids Deserve It, hashtag Kids Deserve It, and you can also use hashtag Learning Sparks. Because let's become leaders who read. Leaders are readers. And I know DisruptED TV loves that challenge. Okay? All of our leaders should be readers. So get out there, instill a love of reading, and always do what's best for kids. Don't forget to check out Kids Deserve It, and thanks again for joining this week's episode of Learning Sparks. Have a great day, everybody. Take care.